Hello everyone. Previously we discussed about the geological field studies. What are the important things or aspects that you need to remember during the field work. Now today we are going to see the second part of the geological analysis. Once the samples are collected in the field, these samples are brought into the laboratory for analysis. Now there are different or numerous techniques which can be performed in a sedimentological laboratory, and it is a very vast topic and we cannot cover all the techniques which are used in a sedimentological lab. So I'm going to give you a broad or general idea, and then I will mention certain important techniques which are used generally in sedimentological lab, and I'll give you an overview of certain techniques that I have used myself during my work. Now, the use of laboratory techniques depends upon the expected results. So when you go in the field, you have a certain idea in your mind what kind of work you're going to do. Based on that, you collect the samples and then you go for the laboratory analysis depending on the results which are expected. So although there are numerous available techniques, you have to limit your area of research and study based on the expected results and conclusions. So we undertake laboratory work to confirm or to extend the observations which are made in the field about the composition and mineralogy of the rock, the texture and structure, and also the fossils which are observed in these rocks. So all these studies can be carried out in the lab in much more detail, and there are various methods of finding these aspects that we will see. Then we can pursue the other lines of inquiry such as biostratigraphy, diagenesis, which involves the geochemical part, that is geochemistry of the sediments. There are various geochemical methods which can be used to find certain parameters, and most important thing which is at the end is the literature survey. So before you go for any study, you need to have a general idea about that particular study area as well as the methodologies that you're going to use and expected results. So this can be achieved in a much better way if you have done a good research work before beginning your own study by referring to appropriate journals or textbooks or research papers. So when we go for laboratory analysis, it involves a stepwise approach. First thing is mechanical analysis or understanding the statistical parameters of the sediment. So this is nothing but sieve analysis, where we use sieves of different mesh size to separate the unconsolidated sediments based on their grain size, roundness, sphericity, and we can find out the skewness, kurtosis, standard deviation, different parameters which can help us in uh, differentiating different sediments statistically. The second thing is petrography. We can carry out petrological or optical studies of these samples in the laboratory by preparing the thin sections, and also megascopic studies can be carried out to study the texture and structures of these sedimentary rocks. Then based on these studies we can do the classification of these rocks, whether it is a sandstone, limestone, and what kind of limestone it is or what type of sandstone it is. There are various classifications given by different scientists, so best suited classification scheme can be applied and the sediments can be grouped into different classes. After that, heavy mineral analysis, where we identify these heavy minerals, and the identification of these heavy minerals can be useful in identifying the provenance, the source rock of these sediments. Then there are geochemical methods, which involves geochemistry, like finding the total organic carbon in case of shales, or use of flame photometer. So there are large number of geochemical methods which can be applied based on the uh, desired results. And finally, the most important, the paleontological or palynological studies. Paleontological studies involve the study of fossils collected in the field, either megafossils or microfossils. So microfossils involve the separation of these fossils from the mud or the soil that you have collected, or any consolidated rock. From that you have to separate these microfossils, then observe these microfossils after mounting it on the slide. And after observation you have to do the identification that can help you in finding the age of the rock and many other factors. Palynology involves the study of pollens and spores, and these pollens and spores can again be studied on the same lines as microfossils, which can give us great data related to the paleo environment. So if you go stepwise, the first step is sampling or collecting the samples in the field. In sedimentary petrology, or especially sedimentology, if you have samples uh, containing certain sedimentary structures, then you go for the analysis of these sedimentary structures. These sedimentary structures provide numerous data regarding the dynamic conditions existing at the time of deposition, like depth of water, the velocity conditions, the flow regime, whether the sediments were deposited under high velocity or decreasing velocity. That is the energy conditions existing at the time of deposition. So you can study these sedimentary structures, either primary sedimentary structures or secondary sedimentary structures, which give you information about the physical parameters of the depositional environment and help you in reconstruction of the depositional environment. You can also study the paleocurrent patterns, the direction in which the sediments or the water was flowing in the past. Then comes the study of textures, which involves the sphericity of the grains, roundness and size of the grains within the rock sample. And this can be done with the help of mechanical analysis, that is sieve analysis, or you can go for scanning electron microscopy. And also optical studies like thin section preparation and observation of these thin sections under microscope can help you in studying the texture. Next is mineralogy. You can identify the minerals present within the rock sample, and this can be carried out by studying the thin sections under reflected light. And also X-ray diffraction. X-ray diffraction is a little bit advanced than optical studies. XRD is much more useful in rocks like shale, which are very fine grained and where you cannot identify the minerals under the microscope. It is difficult to identify clay minerals, different types of clay minerals under normal reflected light microscope because of finer grain size. So in that case we can go for XRD analysis. In XRD analysis we prepare a powder of certain grain size by grinding the rock sample, and this powder is then kept inside the XRD machine, and X-rays are bombarded at these samples from various angles, and it gives you data in the form of the angle at which the X-rays are bombarded and the intensity of reflected light. And based on that, different curves are plotted, and these curves give you information about the presence of different minerals. So we are not going to go into the details of that. You just have to remember that for finding out the mineralogy, we can go for optical studies or XRD study or heavy mineral analysis. Then comes the study of geochemical parameters of the samples, that is chemical composition, wherein different methods are used to find out the total organic carbon. One of the method is rock evolve pyrolysis. Now, total organic carbon in certain cases like in oil industry is useful in establishing the source rock potential. For any source rock for oil and gas to be a potential source rock, the total organic carbon range is given. If the total organic carbon is higher, it has greater potential of becoming a source rock rather than any rock which has less number of or less quantity of organic carbon. And apart from that, there is flame photometry. As I told you, for each of these parameters to be identified, there are various techniques that we can use, but the data is vast, so I have limited the tests that we can perform. Then comes extraction of microfossils from these samples by crushing these samples or by carrying out the sieve analysis. And once these microfossils, which are very small in size, are separated from the parent rock, these microfossils are mounted on a slide, impregnated so that they don't break, and then observed and identified under the microscope. One more study is the extraction of core plugs, which is widely used in petroleum industry. Cylindrical core plugs are extracted from the parent rock, either outcrop sample or samples derived from the subsurface, which is more preferable. And these core plugs can be used to find out the porosity and permeability of the rock. So in the next slide, I'll explain you how exactly this analysis is done. Now, this slide explains how a single rock sample collected in a field can be used to find various parameters, and it is important that you use a representative sample collected in the field and find out different parameters for the same sample, or for the sample which is collected from the same formation or same exact location, so that your results match for that particular region or area. Now see the first one on the top. Sorry. Now first, from this irregular rock sample, which is shale here in this case, uh, in the first case, if you see on the top, core plugs were extracted. Cylindrical core plugs were extracted from the host rock. You can see the host rock in the next slide, next picture, and you can also see the core plug, and its scale can be identified with the help of the matchbox which is in the background. So it is around 1 inch in diameter and 1.5 inch in length, and you can see the parting planes, the fractures uh, within this core plug. So since the formation is shale, which is fissile and fractured, it was really difficult to extract the intact core plugs. And in the last picture on the top, you can see number of core plugs which were derived from different or another shale samples. So this particular shale was fissile and fractured, therefore we could get only fractured core plugs, but from other massive shale formations we have derived intact and cylindrical core plugs, which can be seen on the extreme right hand side figure on the top. So this was done to find the porosity and permeability of the shale. Okay, Now for the same sample, we took few fragments at the second row, the picture you can see in the second row, and that small rock fragments were powdered into fine material, then sieved for a certain mesh size, and that powder is used to find or to do the mineral identification from XRD, and the XRD machine is shown in the right hand side. Then apart from this, we went for thin section analysis, wherein a small chip of rock fragment is extracted from this whole rock, and this chip is then mounted on a glass slide. Then it is grinded and made smooth, and then we put the cover glass and all those things, and finally it is observed under the microscope. Now I'll tell you what is the difference between this optical study and XRD study. In optical studies, you can identify certain organic matter or some pore spaces within these organic matters or between the rock matrix, but it is difficult to identify individual clay minerals within the shale with this optical method, whereas the XRD analysis on the top, it gives you detailed information about the presence of different minerals present within the shale. So the resolution is much better in XRD compared to optical study, especially in case of shale here. Then in the end, if you see at the bottom, it gives you information about the scanning electron microscopy SEM analysis, which is carried out to see the microfossils or minerals in much more detail. You can take the picture at nanometer scale, and you can see some of these. The setup is shown, and adjacent to the setup you can see some of the foraminifera, different types of foraminifera, pictures taken with the help of seismic electron microscope, which give you much more detailed information than normal optical microscopy. And also you can find out the minerals present in the rock. So same sample, as I have told you previously, can be used for different analysis, and this will help you in characterization of any rock. Now, now in this case, in this particular case, we have used the shale rock, or we have gone for the shale rock characterization. If you are going for any other rock like sediment, sandstone or carbonate, based on that the methodology will differ. So that important thing that you have to remember. Apart from all these, there is one more important lab technique which is associated with hydrodynamic studies of sedimentary rocks. You know that sedimentary rocks show different types of sedimentary structures like cross beddings, graded bedding. There are different types of cross beddings and ripple marks. Based on the formation of ripples, there are different types of cross beddings, and it is not possible to understand or study the process of formation of these different types of ripples in field. And as a result of that, a lab setup is prepared, as it is shown in this diagram, which is called as flume tube experiment, where a glass tube is prepared which is filled with sediments of different grain sizes, and water is allowed to flow from one side along the slope, as you can see here, and with changing velocity of water, with changing grain size within this tank and water depth, or by changing different physical parameters, formation of different types of sedimentary structures can be observed inside the lab, and you can predict how these structures must have formed in field. So this is called as flume tube experiment, which is carried out at a large scale in sedimentological labs where we do hydrodynamic studies. I'll show you one video where you will be able to understand this in much better way. Now see, this is an example of a flume experiment where a sand is kept inside the glass tube You can see the scale at the bottom, and glass tube gives you a good cross section parallel to the flow direction. The water is flowing from the left hand side to the right hand side, and with increasing velocity or decreasing velocity, different types of ripples are formed. So formation of ripple or formation of different types of ripples depends upon the grain size variation, the velocity of flow, the depth of water, and these factors can be changed within this flume tube, and you can perform various experiments to see the formation of different types of ripples. Now here you can see the sand grains which are on the left hand side, which is on the stoss side of the ripple, are being transported and deposited on the lee side, that is the steeply dipping side, and the ripple is migrating towards the right hand side. And as a result of this, you can see formation of planar cross bedding. So planar cross bedding, although it is not clearly visible here, but planar cross bedding is formed in a section parallel to the flow direction, which you can see here. One more example of flume tube experiment where turbidity currents, which are usually generated on continental slopes, are studied to understand the deposition of turbidites. This is the flow chart of various methodologies or lab techniques which are used in sedimentary lab, and you just go through this. You don't have to get worried looking at so many things here. You can just take a broad view of the methods like thin section analysis. Then there is porosity and permeability measurements from small pieces, that is from core plugs. Then from the sand and clay samples, we apply different methods for sand and for clay. For clays or for shale, we go for XRF, XRD, DTA, then cation exchange capacity, and total organic carbon, that is part of geochemical analysis, where we apply liquid combustion method or rock evolved pyrolysis. So just have a broad look at it. You don't have to remember each and everything. So this is all about the first part of the lab techniques. In the second part, I'll discuss about the lab techniques used in petroleum industry, or especially in mud logging unit during the drilling procedure.